Hey everybody, and welcome to Megashift today. I am thrilled to have Ash Ryan Arnwine from Collxn here today on Megashift. Ash is a former mentor of mine and is currently living in Japan and building a really unique product that takes nostalgia of records and makes it a digital product for the modern era. And so we're really thrilled to have Ash here on the pod. How are you today, Ash? How you doing?
Yeah, good. Hi, Rob. It's really good to see you again. It's been quite a while. So, getting a chance to catch up is something I've been looking forward to. Oddly enough, even though we were in the same city for years, we managed to wait until I got here. But I'm looking forward to chatting with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pleasure. And of course, we work together at Adobe, and you've done a lot of really exciting things in the field of developer relations and are now running your own business and starting Collxn. So I'd love to learn about your background and how you got to this point and what Collxn is.
Yeah, sure. So, like you said, I worked in like the dev tools and DevRel space for a long time, and it's still near and dear to my heart. And as part of that, when I was leading DevRel for Adobe Creative Cloud, you and I met, and I think we got to work in office together for a few weeks before this thing called the COVID pandemic happened. And then we were working remotely, playing Switch games online during lunch breaks and stuff like that during 2020. Eventually, I went on to go lead developer relations for a company called Nylas and did that for a number of years. Then co-founded a startup with some folks last year. Did that for about half a year and then decided to move on. And now I'm working on this application that we're going to talk about here.
Yeah, absolutely. And everything is really global these days, but time zone wise, I'm here in New York and you're there in Japan. I know as a student, when you learned to code, you got involved with Japan and you, of course, met your wife there. So, what brought you to Japan in 2025?
Yeah, it's funny. You asked me my background, and I think I just kind of talk all the tech stuff. But right, yeah. So I happen to be sitting in Kyoto, Japan, right now in this extremely Japanese room in front of this ikebana arrangement that my wife made. So I should probably address that. But yeah, like a bajillion years ago, I came to Japan for the first time in 2003 and lived here for about 5 years. Moved to San Francisco for a couple of years and then got hired back into a startup in Osaka, stayed for 5 years, and then went to New York from there. So yeah, this is my third time moving back to Japan. But yeah, this time we're living just up the road where we used to live in Osaka. Now we're in Kyoto, which is another one of the traditional capitals of Japan with tons of history and all kinds of stuff. And a big piece of that is since my wife's a ikebana practitioner, which is the art of flower arrangement, it's kind of a big deal for her in that the city is the birthplace of Ikebana, where it started hundreds of years ago. Beyond that, you'll have to ask her about the details. But yeah, I just kind of ended up here 20 some odd years ago, almost by a fluke, and it has been a part of my life ever since. But yeah, we're lucky in that coming to Kyoto is like not a strange place. I used to organize events up here when I lived in Osaka. We have a lot of friends and family as well. So pretty warm start, if you will, like know where everything is, know people, have things to do and that kind of stuff. So it's been great. We've been here, I guess it's December now, so we've been here for about 4 months.
Awesome. And as we start talking a bit about your project, Collxn is based on music, and we'll get into that. Music's universal, so it's really cool that it transcends cultures, and there's all sorts of cool, I'm sure, beta testers and folks that, in Japan and otherwise that are really into records and music. So in a nutshell, how would you describe Collxn in a sentence or two? What is the product you're building right now?
Yeah, so the mission of the product is simply to help record collectors get more enjoyment out of the stuff they already own. And depending on who you are, the explanation from there goes in a few different branches, right? Because the thing is, like, record collecting for a lot of folks who aren't into it, they'll hear that and immediately say, "Oh, that's really cool. Like, did you inherit some records from your parents, or is it all about collecting old records?" And of course, it can be that those of us that collect know, well, one, all of your favorite artists are pressing records still. Like, for example, I'm a huge Gorillaz fan. They have a new album coming out in March, and they're already selling pre-orders for the box set of their vinyl album. And that's just one example. So, anyways, the main thing though is really for that core audience to understand you've got all these records. Usually it starts with like tens of records. I'm in the hundreds. I have friends that are in the thousands. I have a friend in the tens of thousands of records. And at some point you get to a place where you're almost accidentally buying the same record again, or you'll like forget, like you just walk into your house and you're like, I know I want to listen to something, but what? Or I've been in a listening rut. How do I get some inspiration to not want to just go out and like buy and sell records, not just the trading card aspect of it, but really I have been investing so much time and effort into this hobby. Why don't I enjoy what's already here right now? So yeah, Collxn's mission again is just to help people get more enjoyment out of their record collection that they already have.
That's awesome. Yeah, just rediscovering the passion over again. It's like folks got into it, and records are physical, right? It's like if they're in your space, a person would want to engage with them in kind of new modalities and new ways. And so, from a product perspective, a digital experience that correlates to the analog record collection, what does that look like? What does a user get when they open up Collxn or start to use it regularly? What's the general flow?
Yeah, so the goal at the moment really is to not have you using it regularly, if you will, which is like absolutely what probably most app developers are told not to say. But the reality is if you as an analog record collector are probably doing it not because you want to spend more time in apps. So the focus is really how can I bring a little something extra that sparks that inspiration for you to make a deeper connection with your collection. So to that end, once you sign up for Collxn, you import all of the data for your record collection into the application. And then once you've done that, that's really like the major sort of that you'll ever take in the app. What it does is from then on, every day, it's going to send you an email with a record that has been randomly selected from your collection. And it'll, so you wake up and you're like, okay, boom, here's this one record that someone's picked for me. There's a button in there you can click and it'll open a screen in the Collxn app that shows that record with the streaming app. So again, we're not anti-streaming here, but like you can just single click into Apple Music or Spotify. Great. Sometimes you need to do that. Certainly, I do a lot of Apple Music myself, but that's there. Then it also shows you a few records from that same artist that you are in your collection as well. Like for example, I mentioned Gorillaz. So if a Gorillaz album is randomly selected, then great. I already have a few other albums. It'll show me just a few other ones, which is kind of nice because maybe I don't want to listen to that one, but hey, here's a few other ones, which is kind of fun to look at. And then under that, it'll show you a few albums that also match that vibe. So no, it's not from that artist. You like Gorillaz, maybe you're going to enjoy Deltron 3030. Maybe you're going to enjoy, I don't know, like some MF Doom track, or there's all sorts of potential examples there, but it'll pick those up. Again, these are all things in my collection. So it's kind of showing me a mirror back from my collection. It's just super simple. I scroll a page. And then at the very end, there's a module it just picks up like latest news articles about that artist. For example, just the other day, I got one about LCD Sound System, and band I've loved forever. And the latest news was about the fact that they do what they call a residency in New York every winter. We went last year is it called Terminal 5, I think. Super, super cool show. I couldn't believe it. Like in 2024, I was still getting to see LCD Sound System because different topic. But anyways, it was very exciting. But the cool thing is like when my Collxn daily drop is what it's called, it showed LCD Sound System, like the original album. Then here's 3 other ones that I own by them. And here's some other similar vibes. And then down below, it's giving me all of the latest news about LCD Sound System, including the 2025 residency in New York, which is great. But from Kyoto, I'm also like, I was a little jealous, but it's super fun to like get a chance just to catch up on that kind of stuff. But again, just to zoom back out, you sign up, you import your data, and then after that, there's really not much to do other than wait for the daily drops to come to you. And right now, that's the focus. Eventually, it could spread out from there, but the idea is I'm not really trying to pull you into the application. The application's a bit more of a nudge on your back to just kind of like push you in that direction. Like, hey, check this out. Hey, look over there. This is really cool. Have you thought about this one in a while? That's what it's there to be. Not quite like a ambient or ephemeral, but it's again like it's not meant to be the star of the show. Your record collection is.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, they say, of course, variety is the spice of life, and yeah, to kind of mix it up. That's really cool. And yeah, I was looking to go to the LCD Sound System residency this year in 2025, but I think something was taking me out of town for it. But yeah, thanks for sharing that. And so just to double click on one thing. So for those, so the app itself isn't necessarily serving as the catalog, right? The user in theory would already use something like Discogs or maybe a Notion database or something like to have their record already cataloged. Is that correct?
That's right. And so right now, that's exactly what you do. You sign up and you OAuth into Discogs and import from there. And that's a deliberate choice. I've had folks early on that want to kind of come at it from being able to catalog directly in Collection. And that's a thing I can think about eventually. But the reality is, my understanding at the moment is that like probably the core users are most likely to be people that already cataloged their stuff on Discogs. And rather than expecting them to do all of that data entry again, which if you have 500 records, let alone 50,000 records, you will not do. I want to go to where people are. And I think Discogs is like a great service for coming in and doing things like the buying and selling of records. But there was always kind of a part of it that felt a little bit like databasey to me. Whereas if I'm not buying and selling, it felt like maybe there was a little less for me to do there on a daily basis. And so this is really meant to focus the attention away from how much is this record worth, which for me personally, I don't super care about. Like the answer is it doesn't matter. I'm not selling them, to really focus in on the kind of like adding a little something extra. So right now you import from Discogs, and eventually we may add on another way to do it, but I'm fairly, what's the right word? Not stingy, but like I focused in on like that entry point as being like a deliberate sort of like helping the user understand whether this thing is for them or not.
Yeah, definitely. That definitely makes a lot of sense. Yeah, just like one when it shouldn't reinvent the wheel. And yeah, if the kind of the user profile of somebody who would get value from this is somebody who already has that relationship with their collection, that they catalog it, they know what's in it, but revisiting it in a new light. And so when I was initially reading up about this, it's almost like, oh my gosh, with LLMs and being able to use chatbots, is the record collection talking to the user, right? And so it doesn't necessarily sound like it's an engagement where the user's chatting with the app, but it's really focused on that discovery and serving up something interesting. And so when you look at something like this, which is recreating that analog versus like a Spotify Unwrapped or a playlist, like an auto-generated playlist or the Spotify DJ, what was that kind of aha moment that made you want to double down on this analog experience versus all those other type of digital ways we do it?
I think mostly it's just that this is a thing that I do and that people do. This there being collecting records. So I don't personally, and I think most collectors don't see collecting as being exclusive of listening to streamers. And like again, like I use Apple Music constantly, and that's fine. It's just that having a bit more of an interactive component to what is inherently physical items on a shelf felt useful to me. And I think what, for me personally, like one of the unlocks was, again, just occasionally you're done with work, walking in the living room, you're just like, okay, I know I want to put something on, but what? And I have those moments where I'm just like, I'm not even sure. And maybe it's not because I'm tired, or it's just like if 500 choices in front of me, like what do I do? And occasionally I would notice, man, I've been listening to the same 5 records for the last 2 weeks. I ought to switch it up a little bit. And so initially that was the reason I even prototyped Collection in the first place. Was its original incarnation was just a little sort of like flippy interface on my phone. And I have that somewhere. I don't know where it is, but that little interface where it was just like, okay, here's every record. It's all in here. And then I can just, every time I loaded that little prototype up, I could just like flip through and it would just show me random records. And then I just keep flipping until I'm like, I want to listen to that one right now. And it just helped me a little bit bridge that gap between, I know I want to put something on, but I'm not sure what. And just kind of having that slightly passive ability to just discover something. So it's interesting because you mentioned whether or not this is the record collection talking to you or not. I think through a lot of the prototypes I built for Collxn over time, like one being that swipey interface, which may or may not come back at some point. The other one was actually, I built this thing for a thing I was doing, a little program that I was doing at NYU, ITP summer camp is what it's called, in June. And my major project for that was actually building something called Vibe Match. And what Vibe Match did, and again, this is just like kind of a fun mad science experiment at the time and nothing more. This is not in the application, but I built a thing where when people came up at the camp show at the end, they could literally chat with my record collection, but not really chat. It'd be more like you'd be presented with, like, don't think chatbot. It was more like you would be presented, if you came up to my table for collection, and it would say, okay, what kind of vibe do you want to are you feeling right now, or do you want to feel right now? And you just type that in, whatever it is, right? It could be like, I want to feel happy, or someone wrote in something about, oh, I don't even remember, like, I want to something about, I want to feel like how I feel after eating too much Chinese food, right? Or whatever it might be. Just random stuff, right? And then people could type that in, and then it would use a large language model to look at literally my record collection, and then it would make 5 recommendations right there on a big screen. Boom, 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 boom. And it would show you the cover art, and then it would give you an explanation as to why it thought that matched your vibe. So anyways, I think that is not something I want to actually put into Collxn proper. It was kind of more like a fun science experiment, but I like that idea too of, over time, maybe there is a little bit of a toy box spirit to some of what Collxn can be if you want it to be. So we'll see. As a solo dev, I only can move at a certain pace, and so some of those kind of more fun things are limited to special events like that. But who knows what the future holds. But again, I think that coming back to the initial aha moment, it really was about just trying to put a little bit more of a spark of inspiration in between me and these kind of physical assets, physical media sitting on my shelf.
That's awesome. Yeah, it sounds like maybe that was like a precursor, and there's just all sorts of different ways to engage with something in new ways. So that's really admirable and cool. Yeah, there was so much interesting stuff you just shared there. So, yeah, the one thing that comes to mind is, as you mentioned, getting in that listening rut. Like, I found that some of the algorithm driven listening, like an Apple Music or Spotify, we get in kind of into music echo chambers, right? And we get served up the same stuff that kind of has a similarity to things that we've already listened to. Of course, there's Discover Weekly, which is obviously based on one's initial taste. And so there's these reinforcing mechanisms that exist in these apps that I'm neutral on, but it's an interesting thing that we're all faced with. Just sharing a little bit about how my brain used to work. So I was really big on this app called SoulSeek, which was like a music downloading, and of course there was like Kazaa and all that. But at one point, like, my brain almost what functioned like the old Apple scrolling screens, where you would be like artists, albums, and like my brain would almost think through all those different like windows, because I was like a real audiophile back in, like, it was all on my hard drive before the cloud. And hopefully no music rights folks are watching this, but we've passed that moment. So statute of limitations, I think. So yeah, just a really cool way to just intercept that inertia that exists in how a lot of us experience this media now. So huge kudos to that. So you touched on this a little bit. The users, record collectors, already keen on organizing their collections in a specific way. Is there anything else that you're finding that that users have in common, or themes that are emerging in how folks are using it?
So in terms of what users have in common, I think that just in terms of how hyper niche this is, like, it's
Mm.
almost like, goes without saying again, like, I'm focusing on people that are like already using Discogs because they collect vinyl records, which is already a hyper niche thing. So I think there it's quite interesting. I tend to find that one of the things that I'm spending time thinking about a bit is why people do it in the first place. We talked about that a little bit already. I organized an event here with some folks in Kyoto called Pecha Kucha Night. I think there's one in New York still. There used to be. I co-organized that for a few times about 10 years ago. So the Pecha Kucha Night, super interesting kind of thing where people can come up, give talks, but the concept is you make 20 slides in advance, but you don't get to control the speed at which those slides move forward while you're giving the talk. So you get 20 slides, they proceed at 20 seconds each. And I've always loved that format. So I used to organize that here in Kyoto, been gone for 10 years. Now I'm back organizing it again. But I was also honored to be asked to give a talk since I had been gone for so long. And I talked about not Collxn itself, but really more about what is this whole vinyl record thing in the first place. And I was kind of thinking through, why do people get into this? And part of the reason why it's on my mind is when I talk to people, whether they're early users or people who don't use it, but just kind of interviewing people that might. It's just been super interesting to think through all the different motivations behind it. So when I'm talking to people who don't engage in this whole record thing at all, like the natural assumption is generally you're doing it because you're an audiophile, which is definitely a reason a lot of people do it for sure. I actually can't say that's why I do it. Maybe I'm an audiophile, I don't know, but that's not really my primary motivation. Sometimes I talk to people and really like the big reason that they're like into records specifically. And again, this is not, do you love music or not? It's like, why are you doing records? There are a lot of folks out there that do it for the thrill of like buying and selling things, right? Like there's just something fun about that part of it. Some people do it, like one of the reasons I enjoy doing it is just digging through stuff and finding like these gems in a giant, like I went to this record shop in Kobe the other day with a friend, and record shops, you think, okay, cool, you're flipping through stacks and whatever, and wow, your fingers must get dusty, whatever, whatever. But like this record shop was like, you had bins full of records with piles of records. There was like boxes and the disintegrating, and out come a bunch of like little 45s, like all this stuff, right? And it was just so crazy. But like there's part of that like is kind of fun, just like that thrill of like just digging through things. And I found a few records in that, and that's very exciting. Some people do it for like the community aspect of it, which I think is really fun, and like something I want to think about for Collxn in the future. Currently right now, our answer to the community is there's no answer. Like it's just not a community product. It's all about you and your collection, but that could change in the future. I don't know. So anyways, there's all these different reasons. And I think despite on the surface it seeming like, okay, there is this like hyper niche, within that there's actually a lot of different kind of different things going on for different people. And I'm starting to find like splitting those particular hairs is like super interesting to me. So I think that right now that's where I'm focused, and I might do a little bit of writing about it. Like giving the Pechakucha night talk was great. The chaos of words I just gave you, I had to actually like focus in on like just 20 seconds each to explain each one of these different aspects of why some people do it. And I think that's kind of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm thinking like Chef's Table, they interview different chefs. It's like, yeah, either record collectors, like, diary type thing. So yeah, it's really interesting you share that, because essentially my wife's grandfather started a record label in New York, and it was called Audio Fidelity Records. And he was very omniscient and quite an innovator and avant-garde for his time. This was probably like in the 40s, 50s, 60s. And unfortunately he passed away pretty young, but he had Audio Fidelity Records, and it had, in the same way Sony and RCA have banner at the top of the vinyl, he had one that said Audio Fidelity. So now I kind of have this cool new Easter egg thing whenever I'm in a thrift store or a record shop. Quickly you can scan through the stacks and say, oh, was this an Audio Fidelity record? And they had pretty wide distribution, particularly in the Northeast. And we found some in South Carolina at a new shop that opened record store. Yeah, I think it's just people have different relationships with music. Maybe it's their families or their parents or experiences or places they've lived. So it's really cool to think about all the branching that can go on there. And so just wanted to share that piece. And if my mother-in-law or my wife listen, they get a shout out there. But yeah, it's cool because you can quickly glance and say, oh yeah, this is one of those. And it's very heartwarming being like, yeah, wow, this is really a legacy.
Super cool. I'm happy you shared that. I'm gonna keep an eye out. That's not one I'm familiar with, but I'm fighting the urge to start
right now.
taking notes, but that's not going to be great for your audio. So
Yeah,
I'll refrain. But
Yeah.
like, that's really exciting. And again, the nostalgia bit, you can't overlook it for sure. There's again, not always why I do it, but I'd say like I'm originally from Texas, and so like right before we moved to Japan in August. We went back to Texas to see family, and of course we're going to see them again. But like, just kind of, we were like, well, we probably won't be back for Christmas. So it'd be nice to see everyone. And we're sitting around my grandma's kitchen table, and I don't know. I'm sure I brought up records, but anyways, I knew she had records, but I didn't realize like how many. And the funny part is she's been like Elvis's biggest fans since forever, and so I'd say like easily has like I hesitate to put a number on it, but it must have been like somewhere between 1 and 200 Elvis records, which like is
Wow.
kind of nuts if you think about it, because it's like back then artists used to like really print out records. These days it's like a lot more intentional, maybe the wrong word, I'm not really sure. But when I look back on some of the older artists that I'm just not as familiar with, like it's interesting to see like it's not just like Elvis albums, but then there's like the live shows, or like there's these random compilations that maybe he had nothing to do with, for all I know. It was kind of fun. I was like, I asked her, I was like, how do you listen to all this? She's like, well, I probably haven't heard them all. It's like everybody just gives me these records. I pulled out one and I was like, wow, this one's really floppy. I pulled it out, and it was a calendar from the year like I want to say it was like the year 2001, in the shape of a record. But she's just like, at that point, people keep giving these records on the shelf. It goes, she had never opened it. But I was like, yeah, man, no, this is kind of a cool memento. You have this
Yeah.
old Elvis calendar.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a market for all that merch, but it's like it doesn't even need a market, right? It's like sentimental value, and she loves that. And yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I just watched the Springsteen movie, Deliver Me from Nowhere, and that's all about him recording. It was like right after he did The River, and then I think it was maybe Born in the USA or something. I can't remember exactly, but it was all about like that artist journey recording an album at that time, and that was the medium at the time, like records. And there's this whole scene
Mhm.
about the cover art and stuff, and how like the artist had deliberate. But I guess two other fun facts about the my wife's late grandfather. So he would hire like a copywriter to write the sleeve, because it was very global music. He actually he recorded some sessions with Louis Armstrong, and was like really, he was recording Louis. And so my mother-in-law has since donated a lot of stuff to the Louis Armstrong Museum. I think it's in Queens actually. But
It is, yeah.
yeah, and the other piece is that he brought bossa nova to the United States, like in the
No
60s.
way.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah, yeah.
crazy.
And so, like God bless him, because I listen to a lot of bossa nova. It is on Spotify, but it's like very calming. It's very good. Well, that's so neat. And yeah, really glad you're kind of exploring this new space. So, what would you say from a technical perspective, like what about technology right now and just how accessible the AI stuff is and vibe coding? Like, you've been a builder and a developer and worked in developer relations for a long time, but is there one particular technology advancement that you feel is allowing you to be a solo dev for this right now? What's serving you well?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've just spent so much time with this stuff. Like the immediate answer I go to is like coding agents, and with lots of caveats. But like the coding agents, I think if you can get a good groove going with them, really can. I'm choosing my words carefully here. It can speed things up. Typically, what I have found with working with large language models in general is like it might speed you up in certain ways, but at the same time, it might not be a speed thing. It might be more of a depth thing, where like there were times when I was working at previous companies where I could get to something that I had much more confidence in than if it had just been me noodling around either in writing or in code. I think one of the trickier parts of all of it is that it's like working with AI coding agents is absolutely a double-edged sword. And again, like I don't think this is probably going to be new to anybody watching something like this. That I probably won't be able to tell them anything they don't already know. But like, I think it does put a lot more emphasis on the developer to be an effective product manager and an effective software architect. Like the ability to push back on why, and then the sort of like how it all comes together and enforcing the right patterns is really important. I haven't played around much with what's the Google one that just came out, the Google
I
IDE.
think
It's
that's anti-gravity or
that's it.
Jules.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Anti-gravity. Yeah, I knew it started with an A, and I was like, I'm gonna guess wrong. So anti-gravity, I haven't gotten a lot of chance to play with yet, simply because like there's just too many. At least when I was playing with it 2 weeks ago, there was like you'd hit like the usage limit like too quick for me to even like prove out whether or not it was useful. But what I would say is I'm sure it's great or going to be great. But the most interesting thing I took away from that experience was that it like I wrote this blog post back in August about like what my product management workflow is when I'm working with LLM coding agents. It's evolved since then, but generally it is about creating lots of artifacts in plain English that document, okay, here's how we work, right? And like when we write a PRD, for example, a product requirement document, product requirements document, like this is what that looks like and all of that kind of stuff. And what generally speaking, like it's on you as the builder to come up with those kind of strategies. Google anti-gravity. See, I was about to call it anti-climax. I was like, that's not right. Anti-gravity is it's trying to do that for you out of the box. Almost in some ways it was almost jarring to me because I'm used to like having to take those reins in a very specific, like I'm driving stick kind of thing. And it was kind of like, well, we're going to make all these things that we call artifacts. But I think there's something really cool in that. I only wish that I could, I don't know if they've since like launched paid plans or not, but at the time they were like, you can't really pay us for this thing yet. And also you can't use it much. So I was just trying to write like a simple web scraper, and I hit the on my own website and I hit the limit, and I was just like, all right, well, I don't know what to do. But I'm once that's a little more like ready, really ready to run, like I want to try that out. Anyways, I think your original question being about like what is all this AI stuff in terms of being a solo builder, like how is it impacting you? I think that's just kind of there is an element of speed. There is perhaps more of an element of depth, and that's coupled with a lot of, I mean, just everyone uses the term babysitting, constant vigilance about why are we doing this and are we doing it in the right way kind of thing. I'm super happy with it so far, but there is a part of me that looks at it, and when I hear about sometimes you hear about folks that are like, oh, I built a full stack app and I've never even heard the word JavaScript or whatever. Maybe that's okay at some level, but like I need someone to prove that to me first, because I think like we might be on the edge of a lot of problematic security issues for users signing up for things that haven't been built properly. And not to say that like I'm the foremost developer in the world, I'm certainly not, but I think I've kind of an idea of at least generally can sniff out bad things. And but I worry a little bit about like a nice prototype built in a chat prompt or whatever is a huge unlock. But at the same time, if we start shipping all of those things to production and getting real users on them, putting real data, there could be a reckoning at some point. So we'll see. So anyways, that it's the double-edged sword, but AI coding agents is my answer to your question.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely. Like as I wade more into the vibe coding space and have some fundamentals from having worked in DevRel and at a coding school and Ruby and JavaScript and Python kind of ad hoc here and there, writing small scripts, like understanding how a database works and the difference between a MongoDB document database and a relational, right? Like I think just having fundamentals like is so important, and there is something to be said about that being abstracted away and people don't have to think about that, and it can create risk, it can create poor products. So we'll watch that. Maybe I'll do a dedicated episode on that. But yeah, this has been such a joy having you, Ash. It sounds like you're building something unique and cool that helps people rediscover parts of themselves or can trigger different memories and like really re-experience audio, their own audio that they own, and it's not in the cloud, so nobody can delete it, the record collection. And so I think that's really special. So is there anything else that we haven't had a chance to talk about that you'd like to share?
I don't think so. I mean, for anyone watching, if they're into this kind of stuff at all, like record wise, reach out. Collection's still in private beta, but I'm skating quickly towards opening it up to a public beta. And so there's that. The other thing, I'll just like a couple of recommendations right here at the end. Just these are threads of thoughts based on some stuff you had said. One is I love this concept of, you know how like there's no code, like no code, low code, as in no code. So this other phrase I've been seeing, as far as I know, this is like something that the folks at Valtown came up with. It's a product built in Brooklyn, a really cool dev tool. It's like all serverless functions, like just super fun. But this is one of those things that only works in writing, but they're like, it's not no code, it's no code. But like it's no KNOW. Like it's one of those things that's impossible to explain or terrible to explain. Not impossible, but like when you see it in writing, it's really cool. So I like that idea of like these sort of like AI tools for no code, as in like it. There's something that's really cool. And then the other recommendation, so check out Valtown and think about no code as like an it kind of thing. Like there's something really neat there. The only other one I'll mention is that you're talking about music downloading services and stuff. The Vergecast just did an episode. I think they have like a new podcast series called Version History, and they did one about the Zune, for example. They take all these like old tech products and reevaluate them years later, and they did a whole episode on LimeWire. Super duper worth listening to. Like absolute, like go listen to that. I think anybody that lived through like the 2000s bumped into software like that at some point, and there's way more of an interesting history under the hood there than I would have ever guessed. So I recommend checking out the Vergecast Version History episode on LimeWire.
Nice. Solid recommendations. Well, yeah, so you heard it here, folks. We had Ash Ryan Arnwine building Collxn and writing about his thoughts in technology and developer relations and a lot of cutting edge stuff, including AI, and what I am in for the purposes of this chat calling nostalgia as a service. We have a collection. So yeah, get in touch with Ash. I'll include his contact info in the episode description. And yeah, thanks for making the time, Ash. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, Rob, thanks for having me. This is super fun.
Awesome. Catch everybody next one on Megashift.